Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us for our first LinkedIn Live event. I am so thrilled to be trying this out. Thank you, Josh, for suggesting this. And I'm already just so pumped. I'm sure we're going to continue to do these. But so exciting. We had so many people that registered to come today, and I hope that you all are coming in. Hopefully, you'll come in the next few minutes. We'd love to see you. I am Carly Euler. I'm the marketing manager at MemoryFox. And yeah, like I said, welcome. And please, if you have any questions about this topic anytime during the presentation, please drop them in the chat. We are dying to hear your questions. And I know that Chris and Josh will answer them. I know it. I'm very confident in that. But hey, I always like to be super prompt. So I'm just going to go ahead and hop in. What do you guys think? All right, let's do it.
Go.
So, yeah, let's do it. I'm just going to start by introducing both of our guests here today. So first, I would like to introduce Chris Miano. Chris is the founder and CEO of MemoryFox. He spent 8 years in the Army where he traveled around the world. And when he did that, he was learning about the power of storytelling and how it is a tool that connects people across cultures, generations, and socioeconomic backgrounds. Since then, Chris has made it his mission to elevate the stories of real human beings. And he believes that through authentic storytelling, the world can become a more inclusive and equitable place for everyone. Thanks for joining us today, Chris.
Thank you.
And I would love to introduce our next special guest. Josh is the CEO of Storyraise and has been working with nonprofits on campaigns, strategy, sales, and partnerships since 2001. Okay, 2001, that was a long time ago. Josh is helping thousands of nonprofits create more engaging digital reports and campaigns with Storyraise. Throughout his career, he has helped launch and run nonprofit brand campaigns and media partnerships nationally and locally for 10 years, using television, outdoor, radio, and digital to amplify the reach and provide demonstrated value for nonprofits. Thank you for joining us, Josh.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And just as a reminder to everybody watching, today's agenda is going to be broken down into 3 parts. So first, Chris is going to share his simple three-step strategy to collecting video. He's also going to chat about specifically how to get those videos from your community, as well as some ethical considerations that are necessary to do no harm to your community. Second, Josh, he's going to take a deep dive telling us all of his insights into building great solicitation reports that really inspire action. And then third, I personally have a ton of questions for both of our guests ready to go, but I would love it if you would all add your questions in the chat as well throughout the whole session, like I mentioned, and I will do my best to make sure that I get as many of those answered as possible. So there's that. What do you say? Let's dive in. Chris, take it away.
All right, let me share my screen. Audience window. All righty. Can you see? Oh, there we go. All right. This is new technology for us using LinkedIn Live. So we're going to work through it. So, all right. So thank you, Carly. And so I'll just start off with this. I like to think about video storytelling along this sort of framework. If someone asks, what is your mission? Can you show them? Video stories and general storytelling content, it's the best way to resonate with potential donors and attract volunteers. Storytelling is fundamental to who we are as humans. And so today we're going to talk about that. We're going to cover a lot of ground. We're going to go over how to build an actual video collection campaign. We're going to go through some examples and why that they were successful. We're also going to go through some tips on how you can get started collecting great stories. Sometimes it's that first step that becomes the most difficult. And one of the things I'm passionate about is ethical storytelling. And we're going to talk about the considerations and implications in the way that you tell stories and the way we can all tell stories more ethically. So why is video storytelling so important? I'm actually a pretty big stats nerd at heart. And so I hope you all kind of find it interesting to look at the numbers as much as I do, as to see why this is such an impactful tool. Above all else, right, you'll raise more funds. Classy actually did a study, and they found that fundraising campaigns that incorporate video almost double the amount of funding than campaigns that don't, right? And that totally makes sense. Video gives people a real window into their mission, and storytelling is the best way to leverage video. It's just like nothing else. It's more memorable. Viewers retain vastly more information when they see it through video. People telling stories to other people, it's a very primal human function. Long before people could even read, and this is how information was transferred for thousands of years, from Virgil to Homer to Gilgamesh. It's the oldest tradition that we have. They told stories, and that's just how we all communicated for a long time. Lastly, it's what people want. Short form video like Instagram, TikTok, others, they really have exploded as attention spans have dovetailed. And so we like to tell stories about our impact that meet the tastes of the time. And this is what people are using these days. So I feel like in a lot of ways, nonprofits have been sort of given a impossible task of standing out in this increasingly crowded attention economy. And so authentic, grassroots impact video, community generated video, that helps level the playing field. That's your secret power. And it's going on at your organization every single day. So, that's why we built MemoryFox, is to help you be able to collect all that. I mean, it's just so amazing. And corporations spend millions of dollars every year trying to replicate it. So one of the organizations that we work with is Kids Health Connections. And they collected community-generated video stories to demonstrate qualitative impact for their grant application. They wanted to give a window into their mission, and it worked. They got the grant. So let's go ahead and watch this amazing video.
I love the mentors, and I love that they help me and they motivate me and push me up when I'm feeling down and I stop or I'm say I can't do it. They always say I can't, but I always say I can, but they always say I can do it. Never say you can't. So I love that they motivate me all the time. And we're strong, fit kids.
Love it. Like an authentic, engaging video that brings like the mission right into the living room of the person who's watching it, right? We can all agree, especially if those of us who are parents or even not. I mean, this is the best content there is, right? Grassroots, beautiful stories from people who are experiencing the mission. So we know video is important. We know stories are important. But how do we actually start collecting it, right? It's sort of that first step that becomes difficult. And so we built a simple framework at MemoryFox to help develop video strategy. When I say simple, I really mean that it's simple. Video does not have to be hard. I know everybody thinks it's very expensive and for like big corporations and things like that. But if you're leveraging community generated content, there is an understanding that it will be a little loose. It doesn't have to be perfect, and it's accessible to everybody. If you stick with this strategy, you'll always end up with great content and great stories to share with your community. So step one, before you even go talk to somebody, start at the end result. What are we trying to accomplish here? Is it for a social media campaign, a donor report, for a grant, for a gala? What type of content would be best? A slideshow, a single video, a snippet for Instagram stories? It could be a lot of different things, right? But start at the end and then work your way backwards from there to ensure that you get at the result that your time will be well spent and invested well. So as you start to think about who to collect community-generated content from, step two, what type of content will satisfy the requirements for step one? Do we want testimonials, or do we want video of the mission in action? Do we want videos from mission beneficiaries, from volunteers? Maybe staff or donors who feel passionately about the mission, right? Video can come from everywhere. Every single person in your organization is a method to amplify their story and the story of your organization and unite those things with the viewer. And step three, right? Finally, what do you want to accomplish? What are the questions we want to ask that will elicit great responses? So in a lot of ways, great questions, they can lead to great answers. But poor questions, they're going to cause your storytellers to lock up and prevent them from sharing their truth. And that's what we're doing, right? We're trying to elevate people. We're trying to be ethical about it by giving them a platform to share their truth and to honor them. So to wrap it up, like I said, it's very simple. What do you want to accomplish? What type of content will help you achieve that? And then what call to actions or questions will help you get that content. So, so remember that short video that we used earlier. They actually used this process, and it really does work. Carly's actually going to drop the worksheet in the chat, so you can do this yourself, and it contains this exact example, so you can do this on your own. But just as a quick overview of what they did and how they come up with their videos, they first determined that they wanted community-generated video to attach to their grant application. But they also wanted video to leverage on social media to increase attendance at their programs, which is obviously a big challenge as well. Step 2, the inputs. They determined that the very best videos would be testimonials from kids and from parents enjoying the mission. Obviously, kind of a no-brainer here. You saw the video. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. That's the best content in the world. And this step also considered the consent requirements. This campaign had children, so they needed consent from parents to be able to share. And that's one thing that MemoryFox was able to help with, is that for them to be able to track consent from all the parents at the event. And finally, their call to actions, the questions they asked, they were very crystal clear. What was the most important thing that you learned? Open-ended, but with some clear direction to it. Would you recommend us, and why? Why is always a great question. It really gives someone the space and the platform to really speak their truth. And so here are some examples of organizations who we've seen do some really great, amazing community-generated content campaigns. Arbor Day Foundation. They're wildly successful collecting content from their tree planting events all over the country. So you can imagine it's quite an impressive feat. We found that organizations who truly care for the content and the stories, they actually get a higher degree of response if they're showing that they're being good stewards of this content, and they're making sure to keep everything organized. They also tie their collection campaigns to specific outcomes. For example, they designate a corporate sponsor that would be receiving the content, so American Express, FedEx, etc., and that helps makes things a little more tangible. A little more work up front, but again, it's about engagement and getting people to share their stories. So I just think that's a really cool one. Here's a really neat one from we were first getting started. Urban League of Metro Seattle. Their key to success was really knowing their audience. One of their focus areas is public health. And during the pandemic, they recognized that the community had vaccine hesitancy and questions about COVID-19. So they collected videos from children asking questions about COVID and the vaccine and the virus. And then they sent those videos to trusted doctors, and they assembled those all into like cool YouTube videos. And it's directly related to an increase in vaccinations in their community, right? Kids, doctors, it's a great combination to influencing people. And it's all video, and it's all video stories. Wreaths Across America, they host their annual wreath laying event in December every year. Their 2023 event took place at thousands of ceremonies across the nation. And what they did is they collected content from each one of these to be able to put in their reports, to be able to assemble, to send their stakeholders and their grant-making organizations that they work with. Collected over 8,000 pieces of content. So they were able to, assemble these into beautiful catalogs for everybody. And it really is a great way to show impact. And for them, it was just multiple touch points. It's reinforcing the collection. So you're not just collecting at that exact moment, but you're reminding people, a month from now, like, hey, if you're following up with people to be able to submit their content, did you guys take any pictures or videos? Can you please send them to me? Hopefully using a tool like MemoryFox, but you could use a Google Drive as well. So you have a plan. How do you actually start collecting the content, right? This is the part where a lot of people get caught up. It is not trivial, but we've got some great ways that our customers have been able to collect content, community-generated content that will be very valuable to you. So one of the things that's really cool, and it can be a lot of fun, is instead of a photo booth, which is okay, try setting up a story booth at your programs and events. And if it's lighthearted enough, you can really have some fun with it and make it kind of silly, and especially if it includes kids. And hell, even if it has a little bit of wine there, that can be a fun way to get people to loosen up and talk about, why did they first start volunteering here? How did they first get connected to the organization and things like that? Some really beautiful stories that happen because people are in person. Also, it generates a little enthusiasm, right? people are contributing stories, and then they go tell their friends at the program or event, and then they come over too. So you're generating like a cycle of enthusiasm that can really, really be a great benefit to you. This is another really cool thing. Designate a content collection champion. Can't stress that enough. So pull aside a volunteer or a employee or whomever, and select them to kind of have them be the story collector for the event. Make them aware of the timeline, any notable special guests, give them like a content checklist that they can have, like, hey, collect a story from the executive director, collect a story from these key board members or these volunteers, etc. The staff members, they're too busy, right? There needs to be someone who is like the champion for it at your programs and events, and someone who's obviously enthusiastic about it, and they can just run around. And that's what Family Giving Tree did. And they had 148 submissions from that event, which is really cool, and provided a tremendous amount of value during the reporting phase, where they took all these pieces of content and were able to report on their programs to their donors and board. Another thing that's very important, ask great questions and get great stories. Just to drill down on this a little bit more, it's essential to move beyond simple open-ended questions, right? Targeted questions. I always think of it like a kid test. My kids, if I ask them how, at school today, what did you learn? It's just like open-ended, right? But if I ask them a very specific question, how was gym class today? Or how was, whatever, then they're a little more articulate about their response. So we want to lead people to success. So instead of tell us your story. How has your life been impacted by volunteering with this organization, right? A little more clear, elevates them to be able to tell the story that they want to be able to tell. Tell us about the volunteer work that you do. Tell us about the first time you volunteered with. How did it make you feel? I love that one. That's always a really cool one, because everybody can remember the first time that they volunteered or the first time that they donated, what really resonated with them. That's a very emotional event. And, it sets off a lot of things in their brain and releases all those fuzzy endorphins that make people happy, and makes them a deeper part of your community when you show that you really care about their story. Another one, and this one is a little near and dear to my heart as a veteran, Carly Euler, who is our marketing director, put this all together. Her mantra always is they can't say yes if you never ask. And I always take that to heart. And, I always admire her ability to get after things like this. She actually reached out to an actual Vietnam Medal of Honor recipient. His name was Colonel Barney Barnum. And this was at a nonprofit that she used to work with that dealt with veterans. And she fearlessly asked him to attend an event. And not only did he attend the event, he told a powerful story and made a donation and opened up some doors to more funding. So really, like, what it gets down to even more is that you're building a culture of storytelling at your organization, asking for testimonials across multiple channels. It shouldn't just be when the organization that funds you is asking for a report. You should be collecting these things all year round so you have them at your fingertips. And by creating a culture of storytelling, you can accomplish that. Your newsletters, every time you're on social media and your social posts, ask for interactions in the comments. The more you ask, the more you collect. And at the very least, right, it demonstrates your commitment and your values, your story as an organization, that you're committed to elevating other people's stories, right? At best, you'll get amazing stories from everybody, and they'll feel more connected and honored. Some of the questions, so one of the big questions that we get from an ethical point, what do I do if the people I serve have sensitive stories that they might not want to share? It's a very difficult question that a lot of people experience all the time. 58% said in the survey that we did, said that they struggle with wanting to collect stories from their community while actually doing no harm. And it's actually become even harder, right? Like the social media is insatiable in its demand for content. And it's very easy to fall into a trap of making that very transactional. A lot of foundations are wanting more video. They want in their reports. And so again, you don't want to make that a transactional process. You want to think about it in a framework that's ethical. And we, Carly did a great job putting together an ethical storytelling report that includes a lot of this stuff, but it just at a high level. When we engaged our community about the keys to ethical storytelling and some thought leaders, number one, give your community the microphone. With today's technology, you don't need to speak for others. Elevate them, capture their video. Let them be the speaker to speak for themselves. Number two, empower your community to share when they're comfortable, right? If you drag someone into your office and put a bunch of cameras and makeup on them, that increases stress. If you're trying to get somebody to give you a report, oh shoot, we have got a grant report due next week, we need a video real quick. Well, that's not very ethical either, right? That's why you want to collect these things all year round, and you want to build that trust. Be upfront about how you intend to use stories, right? A storyteller might be willing or less willing to share based on if it's going to go on Instagram or if it's going to go directly and only to a donor organization or a foundation. Another thing, capture stories in real time, like I said, at the event or right after the event. Don't ask people 6 months later about a program, because they're not going to remember, and they're going to feel kind of embarrassed that they can't tell a great story about it. So really be dynamic about it. Always be collecting. And finally, use strength-based messaging. And there's a lot of great thought leadership about this, about how to do that. But these stories live forever, right? If somebody tells an embarrassing story and that story lives on Instagram, it's there like forever. And you want to be thoughtful of that. So elevate them with strength-based language instead of deficit-based, poverty porn, as they like to call it. Because if you're doing, if things work out, they won't be at that food bank forever. They won't be at a client, and maybe they'll be a volunteer at some point, and their story is going to change. So be thoughtful of that. Really, really, really center yourself on those 5 things. So that's all I have for today. So please take a look at this free download. This ethical storytelling report that Carly put together is tremendous if you haven't read it already. It goes in ethical storytelling, trauma-informed language, stereotype stories, everything that you could want when it comes to crafting stories ethically. And so with that, I think, Carly, I'll hand it back to you. Thank you.
Wow, thanks so much for all of that. And now I'm so happy that you got to talk about all those strategies today. And now I'm going to go ahead and add Josh back to our stream here. Hello, Josh.
Hi, how's it going, Carly?
Really great. And Chris, we're going to say goodbye to you for now. So we'll see you later.
All right. You got my screen here too?
I got it. Are you ready to go?
Yeah. Thanks, Carly and Chris. That was really interesting. And now all I can think about is that, from the kids' perspective, if you ask how was or what'd you do in school, isn't the standard answer supposed to be nothing? But now you framed it in a totally different way. But I think that's a good analogy because the questions that you ask are really important for the stories that you're looking for. And there's also tons of stories that are out there that you didn't necessarily ask for, but it fits the story that you want to tell really well. So what I want to talk about is how you can take all those great stories that you're collecting from various programs, whether you see them on social media or you're proactively collecting them, and put them together to take all those assets and tell the stories in really deliberate ways. Today, I'm going to focus on reports. So my name is Josh Kligman. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Storyraise, and we help nonprofits with a solution to create digital reports. So that's annual reports and impact reports, donor reports. And we're also going to focus today on solicitation reports with the idea of taking sometimes during a case for giving and asking for funds right through a report. And I'm going to go through best practices of how you take the storytelling that Chris was talking about and present it in a report so that your donors and stakeholders can see it and why that's important. We also focus at Storyraise on personalized reports using automation. And part of that storytelling is about customizing the stories for different donors based on their giving level or their interest level. So we work with all types of nonprofits around North America, primarily across different verticals and industries. And some of the best practices and examples we'll show you today come from some of our Storyraise customers. So I want to start with what makes a great report. And this is really through the lens of storytelling. So it's a really nice next step in the chain from what Chris was talking about in terms of collecting stories and focusing on video. And now I want you to think about how you would go and present that. So I think being really visual is the first thing, and that ties to being engaging. Think about the reports that you put out today. It could be an annual report or different even smaller quarterly reports you put out throughout the year. And it could be to donors, it could be to volunteers, it could be to a board. You can think about the other marketing that your marketing and comms or your fundraising colleagues are putting out as well. And think about how engaging that probably is for the stakeholders that you're sending out to. And, I think that in the past, when reports were primarily PDFs or flipbooks, it was commonplace to make the presentation feel like 75% text and 25% photos and design elements, excuse me. But now there's an opportunity, I think, to create more visuals and be more engaging that includes more assets. And that way you're going a little bit further to try to ensure that your stakeholders are actually reading these impact stories that you're telling them and participating in them. And then there's metrics you can use to track. So what we'll get to in just a few minutes is what those assets are and how they can kind of become tactics within your storytelling to be more visual and not just focus just on the copy or just on a combination of 75% copy, 25% photos. Also ensuring that your content's unique to your brand. We're all very busy throughout the day. I mean, while I'm talking right now, someone's getting a text, someone's doorbell's ringing. There's a lot of competition for just time, let alone what other organizations are doing that are also asking for money or for time or some sort of participation. So when you have that opportunity to get that 5 minutes with a constituent or a potential donor or volunteer that's going to read a report you're creating, think about the content that's in there that speaks to something that's relevant to your brand and only you can do, and make sure they know who it's coming from. It's very obvious to you as the fundraiser or the marketer that that's coming from your brand and in your voice. And you may be very familiar with that program or that event that you're talking about, but the person that's reading it may not. You really got to drive that home over and over and tie that back to a voice that can only come from your organization. Also, a great report is a little more scannable and not necessarily text. Think about the attention span that Chris was talking about. Think about what websites look like when you're teasing a lot of different things. For instance, you may have a program and you're telling a story about how the community or the constituents were affected in such a positive way, and we could have only done that with your participation. So thank you, donor. I think there's a couple ways you could tell that. You could tell that story. There's a short format and a long format. There's a lot of background and a lot of detail that could be there. But maybe it doesn't all have to go. It depends on the type of report. A grant report might be different, but maybe it doesn't have to go in a more high level annual or impact report. You could tease it and then always have a hyperlink at the end of that tease that goes to your website, that has a blog, that has the full article. But if there's a little less to read and the page feels a little more web friendly, like a website, I think you have a greater opportunity to engage donors longer. And we did a survey as well that showed that over 90% of the donors want to know what the stories of impact are before they give more, and they're much more likely to give when that happens. So do all you can to keep their attention and keep them reading as much of your reports as you can. Making it scannable is one of those tips. Also being selective, and just think about just having one key story to try to get their attention to. Everything doesn't need to be kind of dumped in there. Be really selective with what you're doing. And, that's a tough job. I've done that personally, but I think between the user generated content and the stories you're kind of seeking out there, you can find the one that's going to speak to your brand the closest. And not rushing through it is a big part of it too. So taking a look and editing it, but getting a second set, a third set of eyes on these stories, especially with reports, is really helpful. So I mentioned digital reports, and digital reports are really unique because in my mind, it's moving towards something more interactive, and it's living in a web-based format. So it's moving out of a PDF or a flipbook, which of course is digital, but into something that's web-based, that lives at a URL that you can easily access from a tablet or a cell phone. And we're certainly seeing more of a trend towards that, which is a lot of the demand as to why we started this company, Storyraise, in 2019. So as we're thinking about digital reports across annual reports and impact reports, we're thinking about enhancing the reader's experience through interactive elements. So that's thinking about how you incorporate video and a few other ideas, and we're going to get to that. I'm going to show you examples of that too. And delivering a report that's also feeling really polished. I think there's enough technology out there where you don't have to be a graphic designer. You don't have to know code to showcase that impact in the format that we're talking about, to be able to create that more engaging experience. I mean, really, when it comes down to it, it's about I think the art of the storytelling. The science of it is just finding the right templates and technology to do it really quickly, so you don't have to spend as much time as you used to doing that. When it comes to visual storytelling, some of these ideas like video that I just mentioned and Chris talked about for a while helps build better connections too. Feels more personalized, it feels more engaging. There's a way that social media posts that you already have today could be a part of that, and I'm going to get to that as well. And there's also the idea of standing out from the competition. I talked about the competition of your donors' time. There's also the competition coming from other nonprofits. And think about what they might be putting out in terms of their reports. You could have something that really wows customers with the right storytelling. So I just want to talk about that for a second, because the right storytelling, I think, comes down to putting the perspective in the hands of the constituents or the beneficiaries of the resources that you're giving. And my co-founder, Jeff Rum, likes to talk about a great example about a playground coming into a community. And say your nonprofit raised funds through a variety of efforts for a program that could put a new playground in the community. There's option A, which is to tell the story to all your donors that there's a playground here. Everyone's thriving. We couldn't have done it without you. You show a picture of the playground, and that's good, right? But there's an option B, which we think is great, which is this idea of highlighting specific people that are benefiting from that playground, or a specific part of the community that's benefiting from that playground, and thinking about how now little Johnny and little Susie have somewhere to go interact with other kids and develop their social emotional skills, and they're really thriving in this playground, and we couldn't have done it without you. It takes things down to a more personal level. There's a lot of great speeches over time that we often talk about. One stands out of my mind, actually, from Oprah Winfrey, thinking about moments that she was kind of affected by stories she heard when she was a kid that kind of shaped her life and what she wanted to do and how she wants to go and tell stories. And they're more captivating, and it's more captivating, or interesting, I should say, for your audience to listen to. And I think that's about, showcasing quality. Keeps the donors engaged, and certainly moves away from just static reports that don't have as many of those elements there. Thinking about people that are on the go is also really important, and having reports be mobile responsive. So you're telling a story. I think going back to the video idea is a great one. Can people see that video that you're watching easily from their cell phone as it's part of a report? And I keep saying report. This could be a newsletter that you're creating. So it could be any other marketing or communication piece that's going out through a variety of channels. Just think about the vehicle that you're using to get those stories out to the donors, and how they're receiving them, and how legible or responsive it is. And I want to show a few screenshots here, and then some real life examples of nonprofits that are doing a good job, I think, showing the story and not just relying just on telling the story with text. So there's a timeline on the screen. This one comes from World Wildlife Federation, and they did a great job talking about how they were helping to save tigers around the world. And they had a focus on tigers in India and in Nepal and Bangladesh, and they wanted to tell that with a map. I saw another great example come out of the Harvard Center for African Studies, where they have an interactive map in one of their annual reports. And when you click on the map, they're showcasing where their alumni live throughout the continent of Africa, and they're all alumni from Harvard, and they want to show that. And you have to click on the different countries where you see the dots, and you can play around with it. So that's telling a story right there. In both of these cases, from WWF or Harvard, they could have just written a simple article about it, but they're trying to find a unique way to be able to really show it and come to life instead of just tell it. I think that making it align with your brand that I talked about earlier is really important. I think that comes down to using the right colors, using the fonts that you usually have and the layouts that you use in your other fundraising and marketing assets. So part of that consistency and brand continuity within storytelling is often paid attention to by organizations that have multiple members on a marketing or a comms team. But it doesn't have to be the case. I just think that taking a step back and looking at one piece that you do versus another piece versus social media versus a newsletter that you have, events that you have in person, do they all have that similar look and feel in terms of representing your brand? Or does it look like a different brand everywhere you look? Because over time, that consistency delivers familiarity with people that haven't given yet or might increase their gift. And that ties to them being really aware of your brand and really understanding what you're doing if they're not necessarily a long time or high level giver yet, but you can turn them into that with thinking about your brand as just a piece of the puzzle. We talked about video before. I just want to share an example of what that kind of looks like with storytelling here from a customer that we worked with when they were kind of pairing it with kind of a quote, could be a testimonial, and just a little bit of text. So I mentioned social media before as another way that you can take assets that you already have out there and then integrate that into your storytelling. There could be social media stories that are based on events that you had in the past, or the launch of a program or the success of a program that you're then talking about in a report. And if you're telling a story about how program XYZ or event XYZ was successful, you have text, you have a picture from there, maybe you have a video. Embedding a social media post is another thing that you could do to help tell that story. It's a little interactive. So if you look at the one on the right on your screen, you could tell that's taken from Twitter or X, right? So if that's embedded as part of the story, it's a different way for a donor to engage with the overall story that you're telling, a different way to visually present it and for them to read it. It keeps it more interesting. It keeps them reading longer, and it just feels more dynamic. We're seeing more and more of that. And I think it also helps because you don't have to sit around and think, all right, well, how much do I need to write on this topic for this next impact report? Or how am I going to fill the page up? It delivers this web-friendly, short format content for you in a really interesting, creative kind of layout. Photos are interesting too, and I have no problems or issues with AI photos, stock photography, but where you can, use authentic photos that you have, especially when you're talking about pictures of people and their faces. As Chris mentioned before, I think the ethics around it are important. So whenever they're involving kids, make sure that, you have the right permissions. In general, waivers are a good idea. But including those photos in reports of real people is great. They'll see them, but other people that are like them will see them, and they can kind of see themselves at similar events, and they'll relate to it a lot more. I think that this brand went a little further. I mean, yeah, you have the pictures of people, but I mean, it looks like they have pictures of a receipt there on the top left, and they're showing, the fundraising goals in action. They said we did it, and showing what their goal was. So photos could be any kind of graphics, even simple executions like this, or simple infographics. When we talk about great stories, like we have been, the display of them also is nice when complemented with showing the people that you're talking about. So we talked about showing real faces. Here's how this brand, I think this was a school in the Baltimore area. Yeah, the McDonough School did a great job of that, as they're highlighting alumni or people from the community. Doesn't necessarily go on and on with just text, but also it's not just a picture and a photo. So it's a matter of striking a nice balance between the two, which is part of the art of it. So we said we talk about solicitation reports. There's these moments throughout the year when you're creating different type of reports where sometimes you're there to say, thank you, here's the impact you made. Those are annual reports and most impact reports. There's sometimes throughout the year when you want to think about the times where you're making a case for giving and you want to ask for contributions. So I just want to share a couple examples here of reports that we've seen at Storyraise from customers. This one coming from an organization called Star Commonwealth, where at the end of the report, they kind of have this thank you section at the end, and they're asking for a donation. So they do a great job of putting a hyperlink in there where you can go and then donate. So here's another example from another customer called Lloyd Eco District. And I think this one's really great. You know, they're saying thank you. They're making a case for giving throughout the entire report as they talk about their different milestones and all the people involved, et cetera. And then there's a call to action here for a button to make a contribution. So again, it's just when you're ready to make a case for giving. So I think end of year and Giving Tuesday are good, nice examples of that. It could be a call to action to sign up for a golf tournament or buy tickets for a gala or a race or something like that. I think the trend that we've seen is that there's enough of this where solicitation reports and even pitch decks have come to a point where there's really an opportunity to create less clicks for the donor. So here's an example that was created by a partner of ours that's actually a CRM called Give Butter, where they made a mock report and they're showing the impact leading up to it, right? And they did a nice job. It represents their brand. And then there's a place to donate, a call to action at the end. So you've told your story, and now you're saying as part of that story, and we need your help. So there's ways that you could take your existing donor forms, right, where the credit card swipe is going to happen, and have no extra clicks leaving the website, and have your donors donate right to you, so that they're then saying to you, you did such a great job expressing that story that now I'm going to donate right within your website. And then also the benefit is you're not losing them with extra clicks and they get lost on your website or another website where you're sending them where they would donate there. It all happens right here. So I think that solicitation has a time and a place, but is really important. And there's times throughout the year where you might be doing that anyway. I think looking at examples from other organizations that have been doing it well are really beneficial. So Carly, I know we want to save time for a little more conversation and Q&A, so I'm going to turn it right back to you.
Wow, thank you so much. I love all the examples. That makes it so you can really understand exactly how you can implement these things. That makes it so easy. Awesome. Well, yeah, I'm happy to be back. I have so many questions for you, but actually I also need to bring Chris back. So let me get him added back here. Hello. Oh, Chris, did you fall asleep while you were? No, you're good. He's good. He's here. Oh, he's muted. Maybe he lost his voice.
Sorry, I have baby brain going on. I was up all night.
Yeah. Okay, well, wow. Okay, so thank you both so much for presenting both of your expertise today. I do have some questions. I'm going to try to do some rapid fire. So let's do some rapid fire questions, rapid fire answers. Sound good?
Yeah, that's
great. All right, my first question is for Chris. And the question is, what types of content are most compelling or applicable for nonprofits to share?
Well, for me, and I'm a little biased, obviously, because it's my obsession in life, but I just love community-generated stories, like community-generated content, otherwise called user-generated content, which I think is a gross comment to talk about your, constituents and your donors as users, but that's what it is, right? That's what they call it on the for-profit side. So yeah, community-generated content, rich, authentic community generated content.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So you showed the example of the program participant, like the family that was at the program, but do you think there's ever a time where somebody else might have a good story to share?
Yeah. And I like talking about that because people always think, well, we need to collect, let's say you're a food bank, right? And you want to collect content from people who come to your food bank for services. That can be difficult, and they may not feel comfortable telling their story. And you want to be thoughtful of that and not be pushy. But you can tell other stories. Your volunteers are a great source of stories. Everybody loves hearing volunteers. And to be honest, most volunteers that I know, a lot of them like talking. And so they usually that's a good match. And sometimes they've been previous users of the services. And so that can add a nice little wrinkle of somebody who's come through the program. But certainly your donors, your board members, employees, people want to see the window into your mission.
I think that's true, and it's also really hard. I mean, when I was at a nonprofit that I was at for a little over 10 years, like my first job when I walked in the door was to start sourcing and interviewing people that were being, affected positively by the programs and the brand. And then we'd interview them and then write a story about it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then chase them down and ask for a photo that had to do with the story.
Yeah.
They'd write a blog about it. And then
Yep.
I can't remember, but I imagine like the social media team probably then created posts about it. Right. And then you think when the time is right, like, oh, well, which ones do we want to make videos of and go back and interview them? And then other programs that were really similar and just the legwork behind it's hard. So I appreciate a way to put it together, like really easily, like you have at MemoryFox, because I remember spending a lot of time on it,
Yeah. And then, it makes it easy. You just pull it into a platform like Storyraise or whatever. And then now you can create like the best stuff on the planet.
Yeah.
Now you got a beautiful report that has actual video and pictures. Like, oh man.
Yeah, I thought we were moving fast when I was doing this years ago, but none of these tools were around. So it's different now. I mean, it still takes the thought process and the time to think like, all right, is this a good story? And some of the legwork, but like technology's advanced so much, especially with AI, which we didn't even really touch on yet, right? That can help. So
yeah, it would be funny to kind of look back at those old procedures and think like, oh, how long did that used to take? And now how little time can it take in comparison? That's an interesting thing to think about for sure.
Yeah.
All right. I love it. I've got another question, Josh, coming at you for this one. This one is, what are some common mistakes that you've seen nonprofits make when it comes to building reports?
Oh, well, the first thing I do when I see a report is think about it from like the recipient, or in most cases the donor's perspective, and I open it up on my cell phone and I look to see if it's really easy to read through and navigate. And the biggest issue I usually find is when the report is in a PDF format. Like, I mean, during my workday, I use PDFs a lot, right? I mean, sign contracts with PDF. Just think of all the ways we use PDFs.
Right.
It's great. But when there's a lot of stories that you want to read on a PDF, it's hard to navigate on a phone. And I have like the biggest iPhone screen I think that you can have. Like, it's the size of my face, right? So that's fine. But I still have to pinch and zoom and move all around because it's not responsive, meaning like I have to slide everything over to the right to see the stuff on the right and slide the stuff on the left. Am I doing this right on the screen? To see the stuff on the left. Mm-hmm. And it's a weird motion I think I have to take. Or especially if it's a flip book, I don't like, unless if that's mobile responsive, which is basically uploaded into the flipbook mode. That's kind of hard too. So yeah, we have a solution for that at Storyraise, but in terms of the mistake, I think not thinking about it from the donor's perspective with what they're going to see at the end of the day, just because that's what you're creating.
Maybe just like a way to improve it is to consider, making sure that when you are editing or when you're creating your report, put it in a smaller window. If you just put it in a little window like this, you can see what it's going to look like on your phone, right? So, you can just see how that works.
Yeah. The other thing I see is I'll give you a second answer, and that's mass printing. there's not a lot of that left, but there's still plenty of it. And I say mass because there's always that one board member, that one segment of donors that wants to hold it in their hand. And that's important. That's great. And everyone is still doing that and should be. I don't see the trend going that way long term, but that's how it is. But with mass printing, I think that most of the nonprofits I talk to are doing that because they've been used to doing it, without testing the idea of digital. I'm not saying that's a mistake. I think that's just part of the natural evolution where we'll see less and less of that happening. But it's always good to test new things and find new ways to engage donors. Just because we did it years ago doesn't mean it's the answer for today or tomorrow.
Well, there's like 1.3 million nonprofits or 1.5, and if they all printed a 30-page report for all of their donors, I think we'd be running out of trees pretty quickly. So that's a good thing we can do it digitally.
Right.
That's a good point. Yeah. Especially if your nonprofit has some sort of sustainability arm to it. You have to make those considerations too when you're thinking about printing stuff, right?
Yeah. And we work with a number of environmental nonprofits that, like they want to be digital because they're just looking to cut down on printing overall. So you're right.
Great. Well, I can't believe that we're already so close to the end of our time together today, but I do have one more question. This is for both of you. So I'll let Chris answer it first, but, and I think you guys already touched on this a little bit, but what are some tools that somebody can use if they're just not tech savvy? Like they need maybe a little extra help and they're just not super great with technology. Maybe that's to build reports. Maybe that's to take videos. Beyond, any advice for our less tech savvy friends?
Well, I'll go first because I guess the journey of content starts with me and then ends with you. So I don't ever want to undersell just using a Google Drive. If you're an organization that you probably do have like a Google Drive or a Dropbox setup. The difficulty is not in that. It's creating a SOP, like a standard operating procedure for how content will be organized and handled on the shared drive. I think we've all been part of organizations. You'd be surprised, even in the Army too, where like we had a folder for all of our pictures and videos and stuff, and it was a complete mess. Even for very organized people, you'd think in the Army. And so I can only imagine what we're all dealing with today. And so, like having a Google Drive set up with clear rules for how everything gets organized and cataloged, that'll be a big help. Obviously, MemoryFox does that automatically. That's why we built it. But like certainly you can do this yourself. And I definitely would recommend even trying it first.
I think after you have all the imagery and videos that you're thinking about for a story, I would encourage people just to kind of try out Storyraise, which you could do at storyraise.com. We have a trial. Everything's drag and drop, no code. So to answer Carly's question about technical knowledge, you don't need any, and there's templates to help get you going. So it's a nice way to put the presentation together and follow those best practices and get something new and different out to your donors.
Oh, that sounds great. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I have so many more questions. I'm sure everybody here that's watching today has so many questions. Please do reach out to us. We'll be sending you some follow-up emails so you can connect with us. But if you are interested in learning more about MemoryFox or Storyraise, please stay on for a few more minutes. We're going to give you just a deep dive, really quick, not a deep dive. We're going to give you a really quick overview of both products. So I'd love it if you'd stay on. And Chris, what do you say? You want to tell us a little bit more about MemoryFox?
Yeah, let me get into it real quick. Obviously, we're very proud of what we built. I actually originally built it as a way to interview pre-dementia elderly to be able to get their life stories. And along the way, we worked with the Naval Park here in Buffalo. We're up in Buffalo, New York. And they used it to collect stories from veterans. And I was like, oh, that's a really great idea for a fundraising campaign. And it's sort of one of those, I won't go into it, but it's kind of the rest is history kind of thing, is they had a challenge collecting videos from veterans for a fundraising campaign. So I could talk about storytelling all day, but you've all heard it a million times, right? Especially if you're on the marketing side and fundraising. We need more impact content. We need more stories. We need more testimonials. It's always more, right? It's like a never-ending, exhausting task for nonprofits to try to like compete in this attention economy where big corporations have become very good at attracting eyeballs away from you and getting dollars away from you into their products by making people feel good about buying their products. So like that's why we're obsessed with community generated content. That's your special power. And so our platform makes it a breeze to collect that content and stories from your community, regardless of their comfort with technology. We want to make it ethical, right? Not just stories from people who are good at technology. Take all that content, organize it in the cloud, and then design that content and give you kind of cool ways to design it and share it with the world. So integrating with things like Storyraise, Canva, which is more on the presentation side, less on the reporting side, all kinds of cool stuff, right? But it's like an end-to-end workflow, and the idea is to make it the entire content journey. So one of the cool things is that we are obsessed with the ethics of storytelling. I kind of talked about that earlier. So we've built all these unique ways that you can collect and track consent. And we're building all kinds of new ways to do it as we learn, because I know that that's a very difficult thing and it's a big barrier to sharing content ethically. Even the act of letting people record stories on their own in the comfort of their own home is an ethical act, and letting them do it on their time and respecting that they're not George Lucas crafting this amazing story, right? They're just a regular person going through regular life, and their story deserves to be elevated and told as well. So one thing that's cool that we do with pricing is it's all based on your 990, so it's flexible to the size of your organization. So don't worry too much about that. We'll work with you to craft a price that works. And just a little bit about, I think I talked about some of these guys, Wreaths Across America have been doing some amazing work. Manchester University, collecting stories from members of their community, students and alumni and things like that. And then we built a really cool, quick and dirty way that they can turn those videos and pictures into very small, simple one-pager presentations that are kind of like the very, very basic version of what Josh has built. But obviously once we connect with them, you'll be able to build some really amazing stuff out of them. So yeah, that's kind of like a once over for MemoryFox. Obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to hit me up or on LinkedIn or whatever. If you just want to chat about storytelling or startups, anything at all.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, let's see. Josh, I'd love to hear more about Storyraise.
Yeah, thanks, Carly and Chris. So as I mentioned earlier, Storyraise is a solution for nonprofits to create digital reports and campaigns. So our core product is all about creating digital reports. In a few days, possibly even today, we'll be launching something called Storyraise Magic for nonprofits to create fully baked social media campaigns with the help of AI. And we're just really about that connection between storytelling and fundraising using technology as the bridge. So when you're building reports in the platform, it kind of looks like this, where everything really is drag and drop so that you can quickly create impact stories and all the great things we've been talking about that include video and social media. In this kind of realm of solicitation reports that I was showing you earlier, we do have and are adding integration so that you could take your existing donor management platform or your existing donor payment forms and have them appear like I showed you in that one example, right within the report. You can be using any processor for that and bring it right into Storyraise. So we'd be happy to show you how, and would look forward to talking to anyone on this call today about how this could work for your nonprofit.
Can't wait till somebody can just drag MemoryFox content into your platform. We'll get there.
We got to get there.
Awesome.
Yes,
it's going to be good.
Well, thank you both so much for sharing some more. Thank you both for presenting, joining me today. Thank you all for coming to watch us today. This is our May MemoryFox webinar. So it's the beginning of May, and we have some other events that are coming up later in May. So head to our website, check those out. But thank you all for joining us for our first LinkedIn Live. This has been really such a pleasure for me. This has been very fun. Worked really great.
Yeah.
And I look forward to seeing you all again. And Josh, look forward to presenting with you again in the future.
Yeah, same here. Thank you all.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks.